I am going to talk a little bit today about adaptation, flexibility, and balance. And some of those, obviously, flexibility, balance, they relate very well to dance in general, but this is more about how they came into play with my sort of process of beginning to teach the adaptive dance. Okay, I've never done this. Okay, so how did it start? The first sort of pilot program for adaptive dance was rolled out by the Boston Ballet. Sorry, I'm getting a cold, so my voice might go out. The Boston Ballet in 2002, in partnership with the Boston Children's Hospital. And a program like this hadn't really existed before, so they kind of were the first ones to pioneer it. And now there's several schools across the country that do something similar. And my boss, Elizabeth DeFonte, the executive director of Montana Ballet Company, had wanted for a really long time to start a program, and was just kind of waiting for the appropriate time. So in spring of 2016, it started coming together, and we met with Mary Peterson of Eagle Mount to get all of her expertise, and Sherry Simpkins, who's here, a physical therapist, to kind of start learning what would be involved. And then we got input and training from those that already had successful programs in the country. The Festival Ballet of Providence did a lot of over-the-phone support. And then we actually had Shira come, Shira Greenberg of Cochette Dance Company in New Mexico. She came and did a day-long training session with us as well. And the training session and a lot of this, it was not just specific for kids with Down syndrome. It crossed into autism and all sorts of other what we'd consider disabilities as well. But given the size of Bozeman and not being sure what the program would look like and how successful it would be, we decided to focus at Montana Ballet just on kids with Down syndrome to start. So that's kind of where it got started. We did, I think, 3 classes in the summer just to kind of see how they would go last summer in August. And they went really well, so we decided to dive back in. So when Elizabeth, like I said, she'd wanted to do this program for a long time, and when she finally was like, we're gonna do it, will you teach it? I was like, wow, okay, so in the dance world, good dancers don't always make good teachers, and vice versa, good teachers are not always good dancers. And throughout my lifetime, I was never really sure I was either one, but I had and have taught pretty much every age level ability of ballet. So I've taught the pre-ballet, I've taught the advanced ballet, I've taught adults, I've kind of taught everything in between. But this was something I had never done before, so I was really excited. I'm like, yes, I would love to teach it, thank you so much. And then the next thought I had was, oh boy, what did I get myself into? What do I do now? So what I did a little bit of research. We had these trainings. A few of the things that we discovered in my research, and thankfully Boston Ballet had done laid a lot of this groundwork already. So the red and blue duct tape on the shoes. So teaching right and left is big. So in a normal, and this is true for like pre-ballet, 3-year-olds, whatever, you can't just say put your right foot in the middle, which is right, which is left. So we use red duct tape on the right foot and blue duct tape on the left foot. And it caught on immediately. So I cannot go into the studio without one of my students pointing at my feet and saying, tape, you don't have your tape on. So they help me figure out which is the right foot. And so it's kind of a way of learning the right from left. It doesn't always stay on the shoes. It gets picked off and on the floor, but it's there to start with. The other thing that we discovered, that Boston Ballet discovered, because most ballet classes are done with piano music is what's used. And so when they started their program, they used piano music, and it just wasn't resonating, it wasn't working. So the teacher in Boston Ballet thought, what about drums? Something with a good steady beat that really catches the attention. And that was it. It was perfect. The drums worked fabulously. So we partnered with Chris Olson, professor at MSU, so he comes every week to class, brings his bongos and his shakers, and he just kind of, whether we don't even collaborate necessarily up front, but he's so good at just following what I'm doing and playing appropriate music for it. And the kids, they love it. When he can't be there, it's a noticeable difference. So the percussionist. And then we do have, at least once a month, we have a physical therapist that comes and participates in the class, just to make sure that we are getting what we need for the kids, strength-wise, and I'll touch on more of that later, but because there are some issues with dealing with kids with Down syndrome that you want to be aware of as you're teaching. So we have that, and then we have our student TAs. So we have 14, 15, 16-year-old dance students, our upper level or middle level students who come in and help with the class, which I think is almost better for them than it is for the kids in the class. It's such a great experience for them. One thing that I did not learn about or read about was this magnetic whiteboard. So in creating the class, I really did depend a lot on feedback from parents. What works with your kid? You know your kid, what works? And one thing they said was something visual. So they're very kinetic learners and very visual. So I did a magnetic whiteboard with pictures of kids with Down syndrome doing ballet, the exercises and sort of the structure. So I'll have a picture. The first one is a picture of kids sitting in a circle stretching, and then through sort of the course of the class. So the classes don't stay the same every time, but they follow a pretty standard format, so we get the routine. And in between each exercise, we'll go over to the board, and it'll be one kid's turn to take it and move it from the to-do to the done. So they can see exactly what we've done, what's coming next, and they can see a picture and know that's what is happening. It's about 50-50 or 60-40 with how it works. Some days it works great. Some days we're running over and pulling them all off and handing them to Mr. Chris, the percussionist. But it's a focusing too. In between each exercise, we can go back to it and focus. So that's what we're doing there, is moving those over. Okay, why teach a class like this, adaptive dance? Simple. There's the physical, balance, posture, focus, things that might come a little more easily to other kids. A little more of the self-esteem, the pride, feeling good about yourself, and then just being a part of a community as well. Just having, big sister might go to her ballet class, so this is my ballet class. This is my chance to really be a part of something. I don't usually do this. I've made my first slideshow. There we go. My husband, who's like communications guru, he's like, ooh, good job. He's like, can I just change some things for you? And I'm like, yeah, okay. But anyway, I'm proud of myself. Okay, so adaptation. It's called adaptive dance. So obviously adaptation is a big part of it. So adaptation in the steps, obviously. So the things that we want to do, and I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit so I don't forget. There are some, and Sherry knows probably better than I do, although I've been learning, there are some physical issues that make it difficult to do things you would do normally in a ballet class. So hypermobility of the joints. So when we were doing the mermaids, these kids can pretty much bend in half already. So in typical ballet classes, we're really focusing a lot for dancers on flexibility. So doing the splits, touching our toes, stretching our backs, see if we can touch our head to our toes, which I didn't make you do because that's kind of hard. These kids can do that like crazy to their detriment. They don't need to get more flexible. We're trying to not have them have hip replacements by the time they're 16. Because they can, one little student, she'll just sit in the split and her legs will go behind her because they just naturally are that way. So for me, doing the class I would normally do it and realizing, oh, this stretching, all this stretching is not good. This is not what we want to focus on. So I thought I knew what needed to be done, and then I had to adapt my thinking to be like, no, they don't need flexibility, they need strength. So the back exercises that we did, the mermaids versus the bananas are more important for them because that's getting the strength in their abs and their backs, as opposed to making them more flexible. Most of us try to be more flexible, but they don't need it. So kind of figuring out what works, what doesn't, what they need most. Strength, just things like walking on releve, on half point. At the end of the year, we were able to do that, not just flat, but all the way up. Things that going up on that, what we call demi-point. It comes a little more naturally, but for them, getting that strength to go up and down and the ankles. So figuring out how to change the steps to fit what they need. And then adaptation, and this isn't just for adaptive dance, it's pretty much, I think, in whatever anybody does, having to, when things don't go as planned, having to adapt and change in the middle of the class. So being okay with adapting your plan. So the first class, I was terrified. I mean, the first day I went in, like I said, I've taught forever. I've taught a lot of different things, but I was still terrified. This was all really new. And so you do your preparation, you have your lesson plan, you have like, we're gonna do this for 10 minutes and then we're gonna do this. And when you get in there, it could all go sideways. And you have to be okay with adapting what you thought you were going to do into something different. So Boston Ballet uses, as do I in class, chairs. So we'll do our sitting exercises on the floor, and then we'll sit in the chairs and do some more stretches, and then we'll stand behind the chairs and use them like bars to do more, and then we'll take them away. Well, they wanted to use the bar. They didn't want to use the chair for a bar. They wanted to go to the bars. And I would turn around and Izzy's hanging off the bar, or, you know, so I'm like, okay, let's just adapt. And you know what? Let's put the chairs away. Let's go to the bar. So being able to adapt kind of your expectations of how the class is going to run and be okay with it and still get the expected result, but not being so stuck in, no, this was my plan. We have to do this. That was hard, and one of the first things I discovered that I had to do, which kind of relates to flexibility. Flexibility, obviously we talked about physical flexibility. Dancers need physical flexibility. These kiddos do not. This sort of flexibility is being flexible in changing your plans. So knowing that, like if you've had this wonderful class planned out and it's not working, okay, what can I do to make this? So we always have, in the class, I had four or five fabulous little students this last year, and they're at various levels of functioning. So I have one little girl who's nonverbal, who communicates with sign language and gestures, up to one little girl who does not have many issues behavior-wise, so doesn't need as much. But being able to be flexible and know what level each student is at, and being okay with kind of catering to their level, I discovered was very important. The mirrors, all ballet studios are mirrors everywhere, right? This is like, we love them and we hate them. In adaptive dance, I love and hate them even more, because these kids are fascinated with the mirrors. They love the mirrors. I would love curtains that go across the mirrors and then pull them open when we need them. Maybe someday we'll get there, but right now I just have to be flexible in how I deal with the mirrors. So we were sitting in our circle or at the bar doing what I was trying to do, and one of my adorable little students was in the mirror, standing face to face, making faces in her mirror. And I tried a few times to bring her back to the circle, and it wasn't working. So I'm like, okay, let's all go to the mirror. Stand in the mirror, let's make a happy face. Let's make a sad face, make a scared face. So doing emotions, so I was able to turn something that was quickly turning into sort of a behavioral, my class is getting out of control, into a, you know what, this is a great lesson plan. Let's see how we can show emotions with our bodies without saying anything while we're staring at ourselves in the mirror. And they love it, so it became a part of my curriculum. So every once in a while, if we're off in the mirror, I'm like, okay, funny faces break, and we'll go to the mirror, and then we're able to go back to whatever we were doing. So that was important. And I think that moment, that was kind of big for me to be like, oh, I can be flexible in what I'm doing with these kids as long as I'm reaching the desired outcome. The other instance where that became really obvious was props. So in creative movement classes, props are big. Kids love props. So we have a very large stash of props. I have all my Beanie Babies that my parents thought were going to be their retirement back when they were like, you know, the big thing, and now they're not worth anything, so everyone has Beanie Babies. So I have a whole box of them, and I'll bring them in, and we'll like walk with them on our hands or jump over them, and so we have all these props to use creative ways. So I had all these expectations about how fabulous these props were going to be for these kiddos. So the first day I brought out the scarves. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. They're going to love these scarves. It was a nightmare. And afterwards, communication with the parents, one mother was like, yes, I kind of, you know, she's kind of obsessed with scarves. So I had one student who grabbed everybody's scarves and wouldn't let go of them for the entire rest of the class. And that, you had to be like, okay, we know, scarves. Butterfly wings. Oh my word, the butterfly wings are like the hottest prop ever for the little kids in creative movement. So I brought out the butterfly wings. I'm like, awesome, they're gonna be loving these. They wouldn't go near them. They didn't want them because they have the straps. They didn't like the way they felt on them. And so no, they wouldn't even touch the butterfly wings. So, okay, we've learned no butterfly wings. The best one was the hula hoops. So I use in classes a lot hula hoops, but not to hula with. We put them on the floor and we do ballet hopscotch. We do freeze dance where you dance and then you get in when the music stops, you get into a hoop. And I thought, okay, let's try this. In that instance, my expectation was that the hula hoop was going to be a disaster, that they were going to be rolling them and playing with them and not doing what I expected them to do. But they loved the hula hoops. They did exactly what I wanted with the hula hoops. And then we hula hooped with them, which was, it ended up being one of the best classes ever because we hula, we did it on the arm, we did it on the neck. And my expectation was that the hula hoops were not really going to work that well, but it's like their treat now when I pull out the hula hoops. So being flexible and realizing this is not working, or expecting something to work and then, or not to work and then realizing it does. And I think, I mean, that's kind of in life, right? You gotta, you gotta be flexible. My dad, it's kind of a joke in my family, my dad says flow with the go. So yes, we flow with the go in this class a lot. Okay, balance. Balance obviously is another kind of a ballet term. We need a lot of balance in dance, and I do work with these kids on balance. This was kind of a epiphany at the end of the year, this last year, the foam physical therapy pads. We have the balance pads. We have them at the studio for the older dancers to work on, and I pulled them out in class once for these kiddos, and it was great getting them to like balance on one leg. And so obviously, literally, we do a lot with balance. But for me in this class, balance was more about, and I love this quote, children with Down syndrome, they're just children, and they should have the same opportunities that other children do. In our mission statement, it's very important to Elizabeth in the ballet company's mission statement. We're just trying to make the arts, especially dance, accessible to everybody. Everybody should have the opportunity. So these kids, they have therapies galore. Eyesight, they have bad eyesight, so they have doctor's appointments and physical therapy and all sorts of therapies. And while their ballet class is a kind of therapy, I really wanted it just to be a ballet class. So I wanted it to be balanced between, yes, this is your therapy, but no, this is your ballet class. This is, you get your ballet bag, you get your leotard and your slippers, just like every other 8-year-old does, and you go to your ballet class. I think a lot of times kids with any sort of disability or special needs, they're kind of defined by their diagnosis. A lot of the things I learned in researching, like that's why you never say Down syndrome kid. You say a child with Down syndrome, because you don't want to define these kids by their disability or their diagnosis, right? They're just kids. So finding that balance between adapting the class for what they need and making it just a real ballet class. I think for me, another one of those light bulb moments was that Oprah who coined that term, I think, was one day in class when I realized that you can't underestimate these kids either. So I was tailoring and adapting everything to them, and there was one instance where I realized I was underestimating, and I needed to change and adapt what I was doing. The night that I teach this class, I teach a class right before it for 8 to 10-year-olds, just a more typical ballet class. And a lot of my ADP students, they come early. They're just so excited, they can't wait. So they're early, and they're looking through the window, watching the class. And, which is great, I never think much of it. And then one day, the ADP class started, and one of those moments where I'm trying to wrangle people back into what we're doing, I noticed one of my students was actually doing a step that I had done in my older girls' class. A step that I would never have thought about introducing to these guys. It's just, it's too hard, it's not something we would do, and she was just doing it because she had just watched the other girls doing it. So I'm like, that's so awesome, it's fabulous. So I changed, and we all did the step, and we ended up putting the step in our end of the year showcase dance, just because I realized, wow, I need to have a little bit more balance between the integration and the special needs, and that was like I said, a light bulb moment. The other place that balance came in was Montana Ballet Company does an end of the year showcase with all of our students ages 3 on up to our advanced students. And this being our first year with adaptive dance, Elizabeth she's like, should we do a special in studio performance with your class? Should we make them part of the showcase with everybody else? What do you think? And I said, you know, I think we just make it part of the showcase with everybody else. Just get them up there doing, so trying to choreograph a dance that they could remember and do. And again, I underestimated. They did awesome. But that's, they wore the same leotard, same costume, same everything as everybody else, and they were just part of the showcase. And I think it was even just last week, I had a parent of one of my other students that I ran into, and we were talking about it, and she said, yeah, I didn't even realize, but I was sitting behind the row of parents of your adaptive dance students in the showcase, and for the parents to see their kids up there on stage, just like everybody else, they were just beyond themselves. So that made me feel really good, that knowing that finding that balance was good. They're just kids. They want to dance. So I think that's kind of what my experience was this year. We had a small class. We had about 4 or 5, which can seem huge if your TAs can't come. But you can see here too, this was the end of the year showcase, and there I am right in the middle with my kiddos, the adaptive dance kiddos, blowing kisses and waving, and just like everybody else. So we're continuing. We weren't sure if we were going to continue with this program, but we are. The parents of the girls that were my students this year, they can't wait to come back. Now that we kind of have our feet under ourselves with this, we would like to expand it to kids on the autism spectrum. There's just, mobility, wheelchair-bound, sign language. There are so many other kids we could be reaching out there. So this was an excellent start. I'm very excited. Actually, in 3 weeks, I'm going to Boston, to the Boston Ballet, to do a teacher training with them as well. And like I said, they pioneered the program, so it'll be a really exciting, I think, opportunity for me to see if my adapting and flexibility and balance was what it needed to be. For me, it felt successful, but to be able to kind of see how it compares and to grow, and then to dive into some other disabilities as well. It's going to be really awesome. And ironically, I had added this one just this morning because one of the parents of my ADP students emailed me this morning, which I thought was just sweet. Can everyone read that? It says, just because you don't look like the other crayons in the box does not mean you still can't make the most beautiful pictures. Which I thought, yeah, kind of what it says. And the fact that she emailed it to me this morning at 7 o'clock was, I thought, kind of awesome. So, okay, that's what I have. Thank you, unless anyone wants to do the hokey pokey or, you know, happy and you know it. Yeah.
How has teaching this class helped inform your other classes?
Oh, yeah, it's kind of, it's helped me as a teacher in a lot of ways, because I realized what each kid has to offer in all my other classes, and to not kind of lump everybody in together. So in the adaptive dance, like I said, each individual student was very unique in their level of functioning, and so how I had to interact with those students ended up being very unique. So it's kind of made me look a little more at the students in my other classes, and not to get that sort of, oh, they're just normal kids, I can just teach a class, but to kind of see, oh, this is what makes this kid special, and this is what attention this kid needs a little bit more. And it's funny, I think I say it to Jason all the time, the 45 minutes of this class is my most challenging and my most rewarding of the entire week. So it's challenging to, okay, this isn't working, let's do this. This isn't working either, okay, let's do this. And then there are some days I kind of just look at Chris and I'm like, you know, but there's always something by the end of the class that kind of makes me go, oh, that's why I do it. So trying to take a little bit of the appreciation that the students in adaptive class have for being there, and try to show my other students as well that this is a special thing, that they get to do this. Not everybody gets to do ballet. So I think a lot of times it's something they start taking for granted as well. So trying to kind of teach them, you know, don't take this for granted. Not everybody gets to stand at the bar and do pliés, right? I know, yeah.
So I have a couple questions. The first one is about their flexibility.
Yeah.
What is that? Is that just something?
It's just genetically. So yeah. So and these are things that Sherry was helping me with a lot, and Kelsey with APRS when she comes once a month. And Kelsey's great. The kids love her. They adore her as well. Just saying, look, the ligaments are just so loose in all their joints. So, for example, I mentioned, you know, the splits. I can do the splits because I worked and I have some natural flexibility, so I can still do the splits. But a lot of my 16, 17, 18-year-old dancers, they're still working on getting the splits. So this is something we work on. I have to stop Devin from sitting in the splits because she just splays. And turnout is another thing. So ballet dancers use turnout rather than being turned in. And I have a lot of natural turnout, which means I can stand in this position and be turned out without too much trouble. And this is something that either kids have or don't have, so they work on. And in the split position, trying to rotate your feet outward. Devin will sit there in a full split with her toes rotated backwards, touching the floor. I know it's the flexibility with them, they love doing. Unfortunately, the mermaids, it's like their favorite exercise. So I'll do a little bit of that as well. But they can bend in half already just because the ligaments are so, and it's part of the genetic makeup, the condition. Same with the eyesight, heart problems. A lot of my students have a scar here where it looks like they've had surgery. So it's just one of the things that comes with it that I had to learn to, oh yeah, let's not stretch because we don't need to stretch. So that's why having the physical therapist there is really wonderful. So Kelsey she'll see what I'm doing with them and say, hey, this is great, they've improved so much. Or they'll say, hey, she'll say maybe not do it this way because that's not in their best interests, but maybe like tweak it so that we're working on this a little bit more. So that's why It is, talking about the balance, it is their ballet class, but we are very focused on making sure they get what they need out of it and that we're not damaging.
And then also, so are you considering, many boys don't sign up for ballet. Like I put my boy in dance just because, but are you considering a program that maybe isn't ballet, but a movement, a hip hop kind of thing for boys?
And I had more boys at the beginning of the year in my ADP class than in other classes. I had that first slide, which was unfortunately the worst picture ever. But little Oliver, he was jumping in the air, and I don't know if you could see his face. It was just pure joy, just loved. And another student that I had, the drums were big for the boys. So we have boys in our mainstream classes, a few boys. In a town the size of Bozeman, it is hard to get boys. Emerson used to take, this is my son, Emerson, sitting over here. He used to take ballet with me when he was like 5, and then he's like, no, Mom, I'm just not gonna. So it's hard in some place like Bozeman. Hip hop, jazz, tap, it's easier to get boys in those programs. We're a ballet company. So we don't, for our older students, we will offer, especially in our workshops, we'll offer contemporary or other forms. But Elizabeth, and I'm kind of the same way, I've done all sorts of forms of dance except tap. I don't tap. My one tap class my mother put me in when I was a child, I burst into tears in the middle of the class and I don't want to do this. But I've done jazz and hip hop and everything else, but ballet is my base and my training. And Elizabeth is very much the same mindset. If you have a really good ballet base classical training, you can go into other forms of dance later. If you're 6 and you start in hip hop, it's not. Yeah, it's not. Exactly. If you start out with snowboarding, you might never learn how to ski. If you know how to ski first, you have a much better chance of being able to snowboard. So it's very much the same way in dance. And bunhead, ballet snob, whatever. It just, the best dancers have some classical ballet training, and I have multiple friends who teach hip hop and other forms of dance in other schools, which I think it's great. Not everybody likes ballet. It's just true. And so it would probably benefit. So I mentioned we're a nonprofit. The ballet company is a nonprofit. The academy is part of the nonprofit as well. Financially and student-wise, if we branched out into hip hop and other things and to get more boys, yeah, we'd probably be. But it's not part of our vision. So. But I was thrilled to have so many boys in adaptive dance, and we're hoping to, so DREAM, has anyone heard of the DREAM organization in town? Yeah, so DREAM actually helped provide scholarships for these students to come take the class with us. So Boston Ballet, like I said, they partnered with Boston Children's Hospital, and their first program, it was free of charge and nobody had to pay. So we want to make it accessible in that way. Being a nonprofit, we can't just say, yeah, come. So DREAM stepped up a lot and helped out with scholarships. And they've been really helpful in helping promote it. And so we're hoping sometime in August, I think, after I get back from the Boston Ballet training, we're going to do kind of an open house where that DREAM will kind of promote it and say, hey, anyone who wants to come try the adaptive dance, come try it. And then maybe in the fall, we'll have a few more, which means we'll have to add more TAs, but that's okay.
TAs the older ballet students?
Yes. Yes. So I had, and it's interesting how this works. One of my TAs was kind of a quiet, shy, somebody I never really would have thought even wanted to TA. So, because we use TAs in our younger kids classes as well. And they're usually 13, 14, 15, 16 on up. And some of them do it because they just love kids. Some of them want the experience. When I was looking for TAs for this class, like I said, one young girl stepped up that I never would have thought, and she was there the whole year. She didn't waver. She was on stage at the end with us as well. But yeah, definitely drawing from the older kids at the school to older because they have the maturity to engage and help out, but also because it's so wonderful for them to have that experience. Exactly. Yep. I think the Boston Ballet calls them movement mentors, which, yeah, I thought that was really cool, that idea. And these kids are funny. It's some of the things I've learned in the training and going into it. Kids with autism maybe don't like to be touched, and personal space. You don't interact the same way. These girls, I have to touch them. So to get attention, I have to grab a hand and make, eye contact, and they're huggers and kissers. And it was so, a couple of these pictures were when the Chronicle came in and did a little story a few months ago that was in the paper. Quite a few months ago, probably, I think before the holidays. And so the photographer came to class to take some of the pictures, and she came in, and immediately she's got, one girl playing with her hair, and she was crouching on the floor to get down, and then another girl climbs on her back and starts like giving her kisses on her cheek, and I'm like, sorry, this is the way we roll in here. You gotta, and she was great. She was totally okay with it. But part of being, flexible, it's like, yeah, maybe that personal space is not, you're not used to having that. But yeah, hugs and everything, just the most loving girls, which I think is also good for these TAs to see that and, yeah, know that they can interact with kids that are different than they are and not be afraid. I think a lot of kids are like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. I'm kind of afraid. But yeah, by the end of class, they were like, okay, I'm just going to go wipe my face off later. And yeah. Yeah.
Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Small but enthusiastic. So.
It's so fascinating, and it sounds like such a incredible and important and enriching in so many ways program.
It is. I didn't, like I said, when Elizabeth asked me to teach it, I was like, oh, yeah. And then I'm like, oh, geez. Because once I started really thinking about it, I didn't realize what all was involved in it. But then when I did, it's like at the root, it's not, yeah, it's ballet. We all love ballet. Yeah. Do another year and see how things have changed and if we're able to offer because I know one of the things that we did get once we started, once we offered this, I did get calls, oh, are you doing classes for any other, mostly autism was a big one.
Autistic children in
I don't know. I think in a place like Bozeman, I almost think we might have to, just because we don't have the resources to be able to run. Unless the classes are really big. But I just think they need interaction, but they also have different needs. So as long as I think in that case we would definitely want, with TAs in the class, depending on the students, I kind of liked a 1-to-1 ratio. So Chris was always there playing the drums, and then I was there the teacher, and then I had 2 TAs, and then the days that Kelsey came, it was awesome. Because like I said, I had one little, nonverbal who was not that, she was often running off doing her own thing. And I would, if we're doing the head and shoulders, knees and toes, sitting in the circle, she's off in the corner. But when I'm watching her, she's doing it on her own. But to have somebody who is in charge of her. So I think if we were to mix, we'd kind of have to do that the same, just because of the different, when Shira from Cachette Dance Company came and did the training, she was telling us a funny story about one of their autistic children who they didn't realize that he needed pressure. Pressure's big. So what through their adapting and their flexibility and figuring it out, he loved to be rolled up in one of their mats. He'd sit on him. And then the parents would come in and be like, oh, what is going on in here? Oh no, it's okay. He wants to be sat on in the mat. And that was his moment of okay, I need this moment to be sat on, rolled up in a mat. And that's what centered him. We offer at ages 5 through 12. And as it turns out, most of my girls were 6, 7, and 8. I know Boston Ballet, they get a lot of adults as well, which I think would be really awesome to love to have an adult class going. I think would be great. It is. It is year one.
Wow.